Hello and welcome to this Candidates Forum for Ward 6 School Committee. The general municipal election will be held on Tuesday, November 4th. Mail-in voting and early voting opportunities will also be available. I'm Jen Adams, the news director of Newton News at NewTV, and I will serve as the moderator today. This forum is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Newton and NewTV. The League of Women Voters of Newton urges all residents involved in Newton's electoral process, whether as a voter, supporter, organizer, or candidate, to maintain integrity and reliability in all campaign activities, ensure that communications are relevant, truthful, and fact-based, become educated on the issues, be open to honest debate, maintain civility as we focus on our shared interest in Newton's future, and show one another courtesy and respect, especially where there may be disagreement. The League is responsible for communicating with candidates and organizing the format, questions, and moderators. NewTV's primary role is facilitating production and the dissemination of the forums. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, multi-issue political organization that promotes informed and active participation in government. While the League encourages their members to become politically active, they have specific procedures in place to ensure the integrity of the forums and fulfill their commitment to being a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Questions for this forum were solicited from our Newton member base and from the Newton League's Board of Directors. Please be assured that all efforts are made to create a wall between all the candidates and League forum planning. Members actively engaged in candidate campaigns are excluded from forum questions. And now, on to our forum. In Newton, the 9-member school committee consists of 1 member per ward and the mayor, elected by voters throughout the city. The responsibilities of the school committee are to select and evaluate school personnel, including the superintendent and all other school officers and employees, to review and approve budgets for public education in the district, which includes ordinary maintenance and repairs on all school buildings, furnishing them with proper fixtures, furnishings, and equipment, and to establish educational goals and policies for the schools in the district, consistent with the requirements of law and statewide goals and standards established by the State Board of Education. We'll begin by meeting the 2 candidates for Ward 6 School Committee in alphabetical order. Molly Lipchick-Brodt has lived in Newton for 10 years and is a school adjustment counselor and transitioning from a middle school teacher. Jonathan Greene has lived in Newton for over 25 years and is the Chief Digital and Technology Officer at a national building products distributor. We will start with a 90-second opening statement from each candidate. Then we will pose questions to both candidates that will apply to issues or qualifications for their particular office. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to the question. I, as the moderator, will decide if there is a need for a rebuttal. Rebuttals are 30 seconds for each candidate. Final closing statements will be limited to 1 minute. Now let's go to the opening statements, which will be 90 seconds for each candidate, and we will start with Molly. Molly, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I'm running for Newton School Committee because our schools are at a critical turning point. We need experienced, thoughtful leadership that understands what students, educators, and families are experiencing right now. I've spent nearly 20 years working in education, first as a middle school teacher and now as a school adjustment counselor. I made that transition after witnessing how deeply mental health challenges were affecting my students' ability to learn. As a counselor, I work every day to help students overcome barriers to learning, whether it's anxiety, neurodivergence, or disconnection. That's the lens I'll bring to school committee, grounded in classroom experience, shaped by compassion, and focused on practical student-centered solutions. I am also a parent of 3 daughters in Newton Public Schools. In this role, I see our district's strengths: dedicated teachers, engaged families, and students with tremendous potential. And I also see real challenges: chronic underfunding, inconsistent leadership, and a breakdown in trust. I have a unique and essential perspective to bring to the school committee. I understand schools as an educator, a mental health professional, and a parent. I know how policy decisions play out in classrooms and how much stronger our system can be when schools and families work together. I'll push for transparency, meaningful community engagement, and student-centered policies. I'm ready to serve with the dedication, urgency, and expertise that is needed to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Jonathan, you have 90 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you. I'm Jonathan Greene, and I'm running to be your Ward 6 representative to the school committee. I grew up in Newton. I graduated from the Newton schools, and my son Adam is a rising fourth grader at Bowen. My wife Jana and I moved back to Newton in 2017, in large part so that Adam could have a public school experience like the one that I did. I'm proud of our schools. Adam's NPS experience has been great because his teachers have been great. But the voters that I've spoken to know that we can do better, and I'm excited about the opportunity ahead. To build new relationships that repair the trust lost since COVID, to support our superintendent, Dr. Nolan, in her broad-ranging agenda to update the curriculum and to create transparency with voters. To build on the progress that we as a city made this year, when the very public budget fight demonstrated that we as a city could have difficult conversations and still find a way to find the funding that we need for our schools. As your Ward 6 representative, I will be a voice for putting kids first, for following the evidence, and for making practical, data-driven decisions that improve the quality of our children's education every day. And I hope to win your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, and now for our first question, and Jonathan, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
What are your top priorities for the Newton Public Schools?
Yeah. Voters I've spoken to have been remarkably consistent. They want their children, their grandchildren, the kids living next door, all to get a world-class education. And I think that a world-class education starts with a modern curriculum with benchmarks for measuring success. Prior to the English language curriculum update 3 years ago, Newton hadn't updated systematically most of its curricula in over 20 years. Many teachers or departments had made efforts to do this themselves independently, but we ask our teachers to do a lot every day without also asking them to develop curriculum material and do the maintenance on that. And without objective ways of measuring progress, it's very hard to know whether what we're doing in the classroom is actually improving student outcomes. 2, we need great teachers. Newton and Newton Public Schools should be the employer of choice for public school teachers in Eastern Massachusetts. But that is about more than headline salary numbers and COLA adjustments. It's about competitive benefits. It's about curriculum and the support needed to make that happen and bring that to life in the classroom. It's about compelling professional development opportunities. And it's about a balanced approach to both budgeting and funding and making sure that our new teachers know that they have a job next year. Finally, we need the right SEL support, or social emotional learning support. COVID, social media, the general state of our national discord have all contributed to the rise in mental health challenges that we've seen in the schools over the last several years. And our teachers and faculty need the support required to help with that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Molly, the question to you. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, that's okay. Thank
Okay.
you. So the number one indicator of student achievement is student engagement. And we need to make it a priority to make sure that all students feel engaged in a sense of belonging in Newton. And we do that through embedding SEL into all curriculum and by creating a culture and climate that is inclusive and supportive of all and helps all students thrive. We also need strategic investments to support Dr. Nolan's vision and work towards her Thrive budget that she presented this year. I would also say that we need to go to interest-based bargaining with the teachers union to make sure that we are not fracturing the relationship even further and to repair that relationship between teachers, families, and the district. And we do that by going out into the community and to educate and advocate to make sure that people who are not in the schools understand what it is like to be in the schools today. I also think that it is extremely important to make sure that we are doing better than what we see nationally. We are in a time now where there is so much fracture and antagonism, and we need to make sure that Newton and our schools are a place of inclusivity and belonging. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. We'll move on to question 2. And Molly, we'll start with you with this one. Newton's overall school enrollment is declining and is projected to continue declining. What impacts do you think this will have on the district?
So I think a declining enrollment is for a variety of reasons. I don't know that the impact on the district needs to be seen as a negative. We have tremendous schools, we have tremendous teachers. Yes, there is a lot that we need to do, but if we have the supports in place, if we can be excellent in all measures and not just test scores and opportunities for AP classes, but also student engagement numbers and programming and breadth of programming, then that will draw people back to NPS. We saw people leave public schools in communities like Newton during COVID, and we are still seeing that today, but it is not necessarily for the same reasons. I taught in a private school for 8 years, and we saw people first coming for enhanced rigor, but then we saw people coming for what was more traditional education, a lot more program-based learning, a lot more critical thinking and investigation. And so we want to make sure that we are providing NPS students the education that is going to be most relevant for the world that they are entering.
Thank you, Molly. Jonathan, the question to you.
Yeah, thank you. I do think it's a problem. I think generally that managing shrinking organizations, whether they're schools, school districts, or a business, I think is really hard. For schools, it means you're constantly, you can sometimes have difficulty forming classrooms, like we've seen at Ward. You put funding for new school construction at risk as schools start to get too small. And it's just sort of this constant conversation of what are you going to give up in everything as opposed to what are you going to gain. And so I do think that getting Newton enrollment growing again, I think is actually critically important. I think that, I know that in certain instances, like at Ward, there's a broad-ranging narrative that the demographics are that enrollment is going to continue to decline forever. I also know there's a lot of demographic work that says that that's actually not true. I also think in certain instances we need to look very hard at the reasons why more and more parents are sending their kids to private school. Right? Roughly, I think it's like 18% of the city doesn't use the public school system right now. It's higher still in districts like Ward, where it's over 40%. I think we need to look hard at that. I also think that we need to look hard at potentially adding things like universal pre-K to the program to shore up enrollment, to meet students where they are, and make sure that we have a growing, thriving school system.
Thank you, Jonathan. Moving on to the next question, and Jonathan, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah.
Please describe your understanding of the state of the relationship between teachers, the teachers' union, parents, and the city. What steps will you be taking to address the areas needing improvement, if any?
Yeah. This has been a really common question that I've received when I've been out campaigning. Voters want to know not just what is your view, but also how did we get to where we are, and what do we do about it? Voters know that the relationship between the school committee, the superintendent's office, City Hall, the union, voters all broke down for us over the last several years, and no place was this clearer than in the teacher strike in 2024 that kept our kids out of school for over 2 weeks. I believe that we as adults in the city of Newton failed our kids with the fact that they were out of school for 2 weeks. I think that it's critically important that we have a separation of duties between the teachers union, which negotiates the teachers contract on behalf of the teachers, and the school committee, which negotiates the teachers contract on behalf of the city. I'm pro-teacher, I'm pro-union, but those two things require a separation. And I think it requires a separation even more now that the MTA has come out and said, or the Mass Teachers Association has said that they're going to spend over $1 million in the next campaign on local elections through their various collection of PACs. Look, I think it's been a really difficult couple of years, but I actually do think we're headed in the right direction already. As I talked about in my opening statement, I think that the budget fight taught us that as a city together, we can have a really difficult conversation and still get where we need to go. I've heard very positive things about the working groups coming out of the last contract negotiation, and I believe that we can work through that together and build trust.
Thank you, Jonathan. Molly, the question to you.
So I think what the budget crisis showed us was not that we can have productive conversations, is that it took an enormous amount of parental pressure to get the funding that we ended up getting. These relationships are fractured, and it was not the teachers keeping our kids out of school for 2 weeks. It was a breakdown in communication that went back, to my understanding, 2 contracts before this one. What teachers want more than anything is respect and the understanding that what they are doing is, yes, a public service, but it is also a career. Similar to fire and police, they need to be appreciated as public servants who deserve to be paid and respected for the work that they do. We need to completely adjust the way that we are talking to the union when we talk about contracts. We need to lead with interest-based bargaining to make sure that we are putting student needs first, that we are supporting the work that happens in the classroom, and that we are repairing these relationships, not going in with an antagonistic view of unions. The MTA is not entering Newton elections. They have made that very clear and very public. And I think this is a scare tactic that some people have made to try to make it seem as though no educator should be allowed to hold office. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Moving on to the next question, and Molly, we'll start with you on this one. The achievement gap remains a persistent problem in the Newton Public Schools despite best efforts. What role do you think the school committee can play in addressing this issue?
I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to start with Newton-specific data. We know what national trends say. We know what all the myriad of reasons why achievement gaps exist. But we need to see what specifically is happening in Newton, because the numbers are not adding up to what the experience is. We also need to listen specifically to students and families to hear what their experiences are, to understand what exactly is causing those achievement gaps. We also need to address gaps early. Gaps are not starting in high school in AP classes, they start very early. Studies show that achievement gaps in testing start as early as 4th grade. And so we need to make sure that we are doing this work in elementary school and not waiting till middle and high school to try to address this. We need to strengthen MTSS, or multiple tiers of support, and family engagement and targeted support to make sure that if students are beginning to fall behind, that they are getting the resources and support that they need immediately and on a short term to not lead to bigger interventions later on. And we also need to combine these early interventions with deep community involvement. So we need to repair, again, those fractured relationships to make sure that families are willing and able to seek the support that they need for their children.
Thank you, Molly. Jonathan, the question to you.
Yeah. Look, I think that driving student achievement across the board, for all students, starts with making sure that we have an academically rigorous curriculum for everybody, making sure that we are providing, as Molly pointed out, making sure that we're providing the right early interventions for students. I think the work that's going on MTSS, I think, or multi-tiered systems of support, I think is a good example of that. I think making sure that we're getting to students early and providing them the intervention that they need so that we're not dealing with a broad gap down the line, or that we're not dealing with needing to put students onto an IEP or an individualized education program down the line, I actually think is really important. It keeps students in class, it keeps them learning with their peers, and it keeps them, and in the long run for the school system, it actually saves everybody a lot of money. And so I think all of those things are really important. I think making sure that we've got a consistent way of measuring achievement throughout the school system, I think, is important. It is difficult to know whether we're making progress for our students, and that is both high-performing students and students who need more support, if we don't have a way of measuring if we don't have a way of measuring how students are actually doing in the classroom. I also think it's important that we look in the mirror and we have an honest conversation about places where we've leaned into closing the achievement gap over the last couple of years in the right way, and places where we've leaned into it maybe not in the right way, and own those things, own those opportunities to refocus on education, basic education for everybody going forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. Moving on to the next question, and Jonathan, we'll start with you on this one. About half of our schools have been renovated in the last 10 years or will be renovated. Yeah. What do you think should be the plan for bringing the remaining schools up to par?
Yeah. I was an executive at Wayfair for several years. I was responsible for managing and building over 20 million square feet worth of real estate to support our growth strategy. I actually ended up spending a lot more time going around and speaking with the different managers of the business, trying to make sure that we were clear on our strategy than I did negotiating with developers. And so my point here is that I think that this issue, this question of how do we deal with updating the schools, I think actually starts with a conversation about what do we want the schools to be. So in the elementary schools, for instance, are we committed to neighborhood schools? Is that something that we have a value on? Or are we okay with the idea of having a more centralized model for our elementary school students? Voters I've spoken to have been quite clear on this, at least for me. Neighborhood schools matter for students. Neighborhood schools matter for parent experience and parent quality of life. And neighborhood schools matter for property values. And so I would say that, like, if we're clear on that, if we're clear on the idea that neighborhood schools and modern facilities matter for everyone's experience and for voters, I think then it's really a question of just how do we think about sequencing the construction and the financing requirements for all of that. That will be a hand-in-hand activity with the mayor's office and with the city council about what is it that we have the capacity to take on now and what can we take on later. Whatever it is, I think we can be confident that needs are going to change and opinions are going to change over time, and we shouldn't be afraid to make some changes in the way the schools are set up in order to accommodate a long-term plan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Molly, the question to you.
First of all, I think we need to get input from teachers and students and families when we go about planning these new schools. Newton has been following a lot of trends in education for a long time, and I think this is one area where Newton can really step up and be a leader in education. For all the new buildings, we can be leaders in sustainability, in accessibility, in thinking about the future of education and where we need that to go and the types of facilities that are going to support that kind of growth in education. We have seen neighboring communities be more open to smaller, more consistent overrides than Newton has been, and they get passed. We have seen more consistent funding coming from City Hall in other communities, and so I think a combination of those things to look through what we have to make sure that we are really being a true leader in this area. We have tremendous community resources in these areas, in buildings, in green building, in sustainability, and I think that this would be a wonderful opportunity to get some community input and support.
Thank you, Molly. Moving on to the next question, and Molly, we'll start with you on this. What policies would you like to see put in place to improve the mental health of our students? So, in terms of policy, I think one of the things that the school committee can really do is to revamp our bullying policy. It puts way too much onus on the victim in bullying reporting, and I think it should be revised to make sure that this is known truly as a community problem. And so making that reporting more accessible to the community at large, and making our approach to instances of bias or hate or bullying much more proactive than reactive, which it has been. That addresses issues of mental health and belonging for sure. I also think that we need to make sure that we are providing students with all the resources that they need. In terms of policy, we can have MTSS as, across the board in all schools. We've done it as a pilot in some schools. We have seen elements of it in other schools, but across the board, the MTSS really gets students what they need, and those short-term interventions are really a significant way to address mental health for students. Thank you, Molly. Jonathan, the question to you.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that we ought to be focused on thinking about. Look, I think the increase in social worker presence and social worker staffing that came over the last couple of years, I think is important. I think it's important that we continue to lean on that. I think it's important that we continue to talk to students early, and that we focus on making sure that teachers have the support that they need in all of that. I think it's important that we be including concepts around resilience and making sure that we're meeting kids in that through the curriculum. And I think it's important, like I personally, like I support the idea of getting cell phones out of the classroom. I don't, I think that social media is a real challenge for kids at this point. I think it doesn't really add a lot. It sure doesn't add a whole lot in the classroom. I don't think that getting it out of the classroom solves a broader societal challenge around social media. But certainly while we have kids in school, having them focused on being in school, having them focused on being together and with each other, I think is, and in being engaged, as my opponent talked about, in the classroom and feeling like they belong to that classroom as opposed to what's happening outside of the classroom, I think is important. So I'd like to see us do all of those things.
Great. Thank you very much, Jonathan. This question goes to you.
Yeah.
One of Newton Public Schools' core values over the last decade has been diversity, inclusion, and belonging. In the current national environment, what strategies can Newton employ to stay true to this core value?
Adam attends Bowen. Bowen is one of the more socioeconomically diverse schools in the system. I think that is actually a big piece of what makes public school and a public school education great, right? It's the opportunity to attend school with a full cross-section of the community that you live in, that you grow up with, that you will hopefully remain in over time, not just a cross-section of kids whose parents can afford to send them to an expensive school. I believe that we should be teaching tolerance in the schools. I think that we should be, making sure that we're teaching kids to be thoughtful. I actually think that one of the things that I've seen in Adam's classroom and in his Newton Schools experience is kids are genuinely kinder to each other, I think, than they were when I was in school. And I think that's progress, and I really appreciate that. I also think that we should be teaching an academically rigorous curriculum that gives everyone a chance to rise to their full potential. I think that's critically important as we bring everybody along. I was pleased to see, look, the Newton Schools used as their motto equity and excellence for a period of time. Ms. Brodt has taken equity and excellence as the motto for her campaign. I think the schools changed that quite directly because it had come to represent a focus on sort of ideology of equity over academic achievement. I think that's an example of us moving the ball forward and making sure that we're meeting the needs for all students and we're driving an excellent program. And I would like to keep us moving forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. Molly, the question to you.
So equity and excellence are not mutually exclusive. They are actually quite codependent. You cannot be excellent if you are not excellent by many measures and if you are not excellent for all. And I think the role that the school committee has in doing that is through policy, accountability, and action. We need to have anti-bias training for all school staff. We need to have regular school committee reviews, school climate reviews, to make sure that students and families are feeling that sense of belonging and engagement. We need to have stronger anti-harassment policies. We need to track and respond to incidents much more quickly and much more effectively. And we need to embed equity in all the decisions that we make, including having affected groups at the table when these decisions are being made. We need to listen to stakeholders. And we need to make sure that there is equity across the district. You get a much different education and curriculum depending on which school you go to in this district. And that is something that Dr. Nolan has started addressing very quickly and very assuredly, and to make sure that it doesn't matter which neighborhood in Newton you live in, that you are getting the same high quality, inclusive, diverse education as anybody else. We need to support teachers in doing this by giving them effective and efficient professional development and planning time. And we really just need to encourage engaging, inclusive, and joyful learning. Thank you.
Great. The next question goes to you, Molly. Budgetary constraints have limited the number of initiatives our new superintendent would like to undertake. Which of her new proposed initiatives would you prioritize if additional funding became available, and why?
I think, first of all, you have to prioritize direct services to students. Study after study and anecdote after anecdote shows you that the biggest impact comes from those who work directly with students. And so you need to prioritize, smaller class sizes, enough aides, enough, quality teachers. So anybody that provides the direct services, interventionists, coaches, etc. I think the priority also has to be implementing MTSS across the district. It is not new to education, although it is somewhat new to Newton. And I think because, frankly, the last school committee wasn't convinced that it was right for Newton, but it has been proven time and time again that it is extremely effective in providing short-term interventions for students that help them thrive, to give challenge to students that need it, and to meet all students where they are. So of all of her initiatives, I think that would be my #1 priority.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, the question to you.
Yeah. I think there's 3 areas that I think Dr. Nolan's actually made a really compelling case we should be investing more directly in, right? So I think the first is the curriculum investment that I talked about earlier in this forum. That can't be this one-time thing that we do when we can find the money to do it. It needs to be a part of the ongoing way in which we run the budget. It needs to be baked into the budget so that it's an ongoing way in which we run schools, so that we are consistently updating curriculum, so that we're making sure that we're providing teachers and educators with the content and the supports that they need to make use of that and to drive that through the system. And it needs to be part of how we communicate, not just with kids, but with parents and voters more broadly about what's happening in the schools and what we're teaching. I think that serves students, and I think it drives transparency and trust between the schools and the community. I agree that we should be continuing to expand the multi-tiered systems of support that Ms. Brodt talked about. I think intervening early and making sure that kids have the chance to learn with their peers, I think, is critically important. And I think that we should be investing in career and technical education. I think that one of the most pernicious things that's happened in our national dialogue over the last 20 years has been this sort of use of trade school as a slur in certain conversations in certain circles. The notion that some students' ambitions are less than others. I work in the construction business. AI is never going to replace electricians and carpenters. I think for students who have ambitions here and career goals there, I think we should be meeting them where they are and providing them the opportunity to thrive.
Great. Thank you very much, Jonathan. It seems we have run out of time for questions, so we will now go to the closing statements, and you will have 60 seconds or 1 minute for your closing statements.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, you may go first.
Great, thank you. I want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters, my opponent, Ms. Brodt, and any voter who takes the opportunity and makes the time to watch this forum and make a decision on their own. The school committee has 4 primary responsibilities. The first is to performance manage the superintendent. The second is to review and approve the school budgets. The third is to establish goals and policies for the Newton schools. And the fourth is to negotiate the contract between the teachers union and the city of Newton itself. All of these topics are well suited to my 25 years in business, and I'm excited to engage in them. I think that setting education priorities is about listening to voters and parents and reflecting those priorities back on the schools. The voters that I've talked to have been hugely aligned or highly aligned with the priorities that I've set forward. I believe that we need a separation between the school committee and the union itself and contract negotiation. And I believe that committing to listen to your team is a central tenet of leadership. I will listen to the voters and the 2,000 educators and administrators in our school system, and I will do right by our kids.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Molly, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm running for school committee because I've lived the challenges that we are facing as an educator, as a mental health counselor, and as a parent. And I know what it takes to support students, not just academically, but socially and emotionally as well. Our schools need leadership grounded in real experience, someone who can rebuild trust, advocate for equity and excellence, and put students at the center of every decision. I've been on both sides of the desk in parent-teacher conferences. I have sat with students in crisis, and I have helped families navigate school systems. I will fight for strategic investments, real transparency, and policies that put student needs first, because our kids deserve nothing less. I'd be honored to earn your support and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Molly. And thank you to both candidates for participating tonight. I also want to thank NewTV and the League of Women Voters of Newton for providing this opportunity for voters to learn more about the candidates. Let me remind viewers that both of these candidates are running for Ward 6 School Committee. All Newton voters may vote for one of these 2 candidates. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you will not be able to get to the polls on November 4th, you can vote absentee or early by mail or in person. For further information, including to learn where your polling location is, call the Newton Elections Department at 617-796-1350 or visit the city's website at newtonma.gov/government/elections. Be sure to check the Newton League's website at lwvnewton.org for more information about our upcoming Voters Guide. Today's forum is a co-production of NewTV and the League of Women Voters of Newton. Any use or reuse of this program requires the approval of NewTV and the League and must be shown in its entirety without any editing, only after the program initially airs on NewTV. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, does not support or oppose specific candidates or political parties. It does, however, take positions and advocate for issues that it has studied. Membership in the League is open to all people. Contact or visit lwvnewton.org and follow them on Facebook and Instagram. NewTV is Newton's award-winning state-of-the-art media center, specializing in television production, training, and building community partnerships. It is Newton's primary source of locally relevant programming. Membership in NewTV is open to all Newton residents. For more information, call 617-965-7200 or visit the website at newtv.org. I'm Jen Adams for the League of Women Voters and NewTV. I thank you for watching. Participate in our elections and remember, democracy is not a spectator sport.